Hello again everyone. At the time of me writing these words, there aren't really any native ultra-wide-angle lenses for Canon's new APS-C mirrorless RF mount cameras, although it's likely that Canon will eventually re-release their nice 11-22mm EF-M lens for RFS mount, so I thought it might be fun to retest some of their well-regarded EFS ultra-wide-angle legacy lenses using an adapter to see how well they work on a very high-resolution EOS R7 camera. And so we arrive at Exhibit A, the Canon EFS 10-18mm f4.5-5.6 IS STM. When it came out back in 2014, it astonished everyone with its very low price and very good image quality, opening up the world of ultra-wide-angle photography even to those Canon shooters on a low budget, which was a beautiful thing in my opinion. It also came out just in time for me to return to South Korea after a few years away to make a documentary about the exciting Christian church out there. Link in the description below for anyone interested. The lens's zoom range of 10-18mm is the full frame equivalent of about 16-29mm, which isn't a very long zoom range really, but at least it still goes nice and wide. The aperture brightness of f4.5-5.6 is pretty dark, making it a difficult lens for shooting in dark situations, especially video work, although of course that dark maximum aperture will have reduced the size and weight and cost of the lens. Probably the most interesting thing about this lens now is that it's still such great value at only $300 new, and over on eBay you can find plenty of second-hand copies for about half of that price. Its image stabilization is a nice little feature too, especially of course if your camera doesn't have it built in. Here's some footage at 18mm without stabilization, and here it is turned on. As you can see, it helps you quite a lot, most noticeably, of course, when you're zoomed in. The build quality of this lens is plasticky, even down to the lens mount, with no weather sealing. At the rear, there's a useful auto-manual focus switch, as well as a switch for the image stabilization. Then comes a rubberized zoom ring, which turns smoothly and evenly, and on this copy of the lens, without any stickiness to it, useful for video work. And in front of that comes a little plastic manual focus ring, which turns very smoothly and lightly. It's electronically coupled to the focus motor and works very responsively to being turned. The lens exhibits only a little focus breathing when you're zoomed all the way in and changing focus. Zoom out and it's a little more noticeable, but still not an issue really. The lens's STM autofocus motor is quick, silent and accurate, although frankly, I don't imagine that being the autofocus motor on an ultra-wide-angle dark aperture lens is really all that taxing. The lens comes with the usual front and rear caps, although you'll have to buy a lens hood separately if you want one of those. It has a filter thread size of 67mm, which is very useful, although you'll want to mount only quite thin filters onto it in case of vignetting any image corners. My EOS R7 camera had no issues with this lens with in-camera corrections or anything like that. It all worked straight out of the gate. Overall, the build quality of this lens is low budget and plasticky, but actually absolutely fine, and its electronics work great. Alright, let's take a look at image quality now. How will the lens cope being mounted on a 32.5MP EOS R7 camera? Let's take a look. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At 10mm and f4.5, sharpness is excellent in the middle of the image and contrast is very good too. Over in the corners, image quality remains quite decent. Not super sharp by any means, but really not bad at all. Image quality stays this good down to f5.6 and even f8. Stop down to f11 or f16 and the lens just gets softer due to diffraction. Okay, let's zoom all the way in to 18mm now. At f5.6, the central sharpness continues to be excellent. Corner image quality is sharp but a bit ghostly with somewhat low contrast. Stop down to f8 or f11 for much better contrast, but not really any more sharpness. Overall, it's a really solid performance from this cheap little APS-C camera lens. Its corner image quality is never super sharp, but it's perfectly decent, and central image quality is out of this world. It's a fair bit sharper than its older brother, the 10-22mm f3.5-4.5 that I tested a little while ago. Okay, let's turn off in-camera corrections and look at vignetting and distortion. It's good news here too, really, probably because of the rather narrow zoom range. At 10mm we see surprisingly little barrel distortion. Nice. Vignetting at f4.5 is pretty strong though. Stop down to f5.6 or f8 for those corners to brighten up a bit. Zoom into 18mm for only negligible barrel distortion to appear, but again, dark corners at the brightest aperture. It's only at f11 that those corners brighten up. Still, a good show here. The only corrections you'll really need to do are for peripheral illumination. Let's see about close-up image quality now. The lens's impressive minimum focus distance of only 20cm can get you really close to smaller subjects. At f5.6, close-up image quality is pretty ghostly, but not too soft. Stop down to f8 for contrast to make a return, although the lens is never quite as sharp close-up as it is at normal distances. Okay, let's see how the lens works against bright lights now. It's not a great performance. There's some rather bitty flaring to be seen here and there at wider angles, which remains as you zoom in, so it's just a so-so performance here. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look at coma levels. f4.5 is hardly a very bright aperture to be starting from, but I'm still glad to say that virtually no coma smearing can be seen here. Let's zoom out and look for sun stars. Well, forget about it basically. Only when you're stopped down to f22 do even small sun stars begin to appear. Finally, bokeh. It's really hard to get out of focus backgrounds with this lens due to its ultra-wide-angle nature and very dark aperture. When you do get them, by getting very close to your subject, those backgrounds look just okay. Overall, well, if you don't mind its dark maximum aperture and rather limited zoom range, then adapting this lens onto your APS-C EOS R mirrorless camera is actually a great option for stills photographers or video makers who want to save a little money. The lens is sharp with no real optical problems and is great value whether you're buying it new or second hand. Although it's not a perfect lens, its great value for money makes sure it comes highly recommended. Okay, well, special thanks goes to my mother-in-law for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing. As usual though, it's a totally independent review. Well, let me know if you're getting sick of these EOS R7 reviews, by the way. I'm loving putting them together though. Any excuse to use that lovely camera and put those old lenses through their paces. Anyway, if you watch these reviews regularly and want to be a part of keeping them going here, then check out my Patreon page. My supporters there make a huge difference to me keeping this channel going, and they get all kinds of exclusive bonus content thrown into the mix also. Check it out in the description below, and ciao for now.